Family loyalty is supposed to go both ways. At least, that's what I believed for most of my life. I'm Daniel, 33, single, no kids, but for years I was more involved in my brother's family than anyone should have to be. My older brother, Ryan, was the golden child. Always had been. He married young, had 3 kids with his wife Emma, and built this image of the perfect family man. But behind that image? He was drowning in debt, job hopping, and constantly leaning on me to keep his world spinning. And like an idiot, I let him. Need help with rent? I covered it. Kids need Christmas gifts? I made sure they had the best under the tree. Emma's car broke down. Guess who paid for repairs? I told myself it was what family does. That one day, when Ryan got back on his feet, he'd appreciate the years I spent making sure his kids didn't feel the weight of his mistakes. But this past Christmas? I learned exactly how little any of that meant. It started like every other holiday. I showed up at Susan and Robert's house, our parents, with my arms full of gifts. Not just for Mom and Dad, but for Ryan's kids, Emma, and even a little something for Ryan himself. Because despite everything, I still held on to the hope that maybe this year would be different. Maybe there'd be gratitude instead of expectation. I walked through the door, greeted by the usual chaos. Kids running around, Susan fussing over dinner, Robert watching TV like he wasn't aware a family gathering was happening. Ryan was in the kitchen, laughing with Emma. When he saw me, his smile dropped, just for a second. I brushed it off. We went through the motions: dinner, small talk, the awkward exchange of gifts where I gave more than I received, as usual. Then came the moment that changed everything. I was sitting with my niece, helping her assemble a toy I'd bought, when I overheard Ryan talking to Emma in the next room. I wasn't eavesdropping, but I wasn't exactly invited into their conversation either. His voice was low, but clear enough. I don't know why Daniel even bothers showing up. This is a family space. No place for losers who can't hold on to a relationship or build something real. Emma laughed. Well, at least he's good for gifts. I froze. Not because their words surprised me, but because deep down, I think I'd always known. I just never expected them to say it out loud. All those years of helping. All the times I paid their bills without question. All the sacrifices I made so his kids wouldn't go without. And to them, I was nothing more than a loser with a credit card. I stood up, walked into the room, and looked Ryan dead in the eye. He went pale, clearly realizing I'd heard every word. I didn't yell. Didn't cause a scene. I simply said, "You won't have to worry about me bothering you anymore." And I left. No goodbyes. No explanations. Because people like that don't deserve closure. They deserve consequences. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at my bank statements. Thousands have been spent over the years. Rent payments. Utility bills. Emergency transfers. Gifts. I wasn't just generous. I was their safety net. And they'd been laughing behind my back the entire time. I called Mr. Bennett, my lawyer, the next morning. Not because I was planning anything drastic, but because I wanted advice on how to untangle myself from any lingering financial ties. He reviewed everything and confirmed what I already suspected. There were no formal agreements. No debts owed on paper. Which meant Ryan and Emma had been getting a free ride, and I'd let them. But not anymore. Mr. Bennett asked if I wanted to send a formal notice, something to make it clear that financial support was done. I told him no. Because silence would say more than any letter ever could. After that Christmas, I didn't reach out. No calls. No texts. No birthday reminders for the kids. For the first time in years, I stopped playing the role of unpaid provider. And at first, it was quiet. Too quiet. I knew how this worked. People like Ryan and Emma don't notice you've pulled away until it affects them. So I waited. And sure enough, 3 weeks later, my phone buzzed. A message from Ryan. "Hey, rent's tight this month. Can you spot me until next paycheck?" No apology. No acknowledgement of what he'd said. Just straight back to business as usual. Because in his mind, that's all I was good for. I left the message on read. 2 days later, another text. "Daniel? Did you get my message?" Then Emma chimed in. "The kids are asking about you. Don't punish them over a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. Funny how disrespect gets downgraded when the money stops flowing. I didn't respond. Because I wasn't interested in explanations or excuses. I was interested in peace, something I hadn't experienced since I started carrying their financial burdens. By the end of the month, the tone shifted. Ryan called, something he rarely did unless it was urgent. I let it go to voicemail. His message was laced with frustration masked as concern. Look, I don't know what your problem is, but this is family. You don't just turn your back on us. I smiled when I heard it. Because turning my back was the best thing I'd ever done. A week later, Susan called. I debated answering, but curiosity won. She jumped straight into it. Daniel, why is Ryan telling me you're refusing to help? They're struggling. I kept my voice calm. Because I'm done being their safety net. She gasped like I'd said something cruel. But you've always been there for them. Exactly. I'd always been there, and it got me nothing but whispered insults and empty gratitude. I told her. Maybe it's time Ryan learns how to be there for himself. She didn't like that answer. But for once, I didn't care. I ended the call before she could pile on the guilt. The next month, I heard through mutual friends that Ryan and Emma were falling behind on bills. Their landlord wasn't interested in excuses. And without my regular deposits, reality hit them fast. They even tried setting up a GoFundMe, painting a sob story about unexpected hardships. I didn't contribute. But I did watch quietly as the donations trickled in far slower than they expected. Because when you spend years burning bridges, you shouldn't be surprised when no one rushes to build you a new one. Emma sent one last message. I don't know what's gotten into you, but this isn't who you are. You're better than this. I almost replied. You're right. I am better than being used. But I didn't bother. Because people like her don't hear the truth, they hear inconvenience. And I was done making my life harder just to keep theirs afloat. Mr. Bennett checked in, asking if I wanted any official documentation to protect myself from future emergencies. I told him no. Because I wasn't giving them any opening. If they showed up at my door, I'd simply close it. If they tried to guilt me at family gatherings, I wouldn't be there to hear it. For the first time in years, my savings account stayed untouched. I booked a vacation, my first real one in forever. No last-minute cancellations because Ryan needed rent money. No nagging texts while I was away, asking for just a little help. Just me, on a beach, realizing how light life feels when you stop carrying people who refuse to walk on their own. It took 2 months for Ryan to show up in person. I wasn't surprised. When the texts didn't work, when Susan's guilt trips failed, and when Emma's manipulation fell flat, this was the next move. Desperation always knocks louder when silence is the answer. It was a Saturday morning. I was enjoying coffee on my balcony when I heard a knock at the door. I knew before I even looked through the peephole who it would be. There he was, Ryan. Gone was the smug confidence he usually carried. He looked tired. Stressed. Smaller somehow. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. He shifted awkwardly. Can we talk? I crossed my arms. We're talking. He glanced around, like he was hoping for privacy. But I wasn't giving him the comfort of sitting down and pretending this was just a brotherly chat. Finally, he got to the point. I know things have been tense, but I need your help. I raised an eyebrow. Help? Or money? His jaw clenched. Daniel, come on. It's the same thing right now. And that was all I needed to hear. To him, my value was still measured in dollars, not in being his brother. He launched into his sob story. They were behind on rent. Emma was struggling to find extra work. How the kids shouldn't have to suffer because of a misunderstanding between adults. I let him talk. Let him dig the hole deeper with every word that screamed entitlement disguised as need. When he finally stopped, I asked, Do you even remember what you said about me at Christmas? He looked down. Didn't answer. So I reminded him. No place for losers. That's what you said? He ran a hand through his hair, sighing. I didn't mean it like that. You know how people joke. I cut him off. No, Ryan. That wasn't a joke. That was how you saw me until the loser stopped paying your bills. There was a long pause. For once, he didn't have a comeback. Finally, he muttered. So that's it? You're just going to abandon us? I smiled, not out of malice, but because I'd been waiting for this moment. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm just no longer financing people who think respect is optional. He tried one last angle, the kids. They miss you, you know. You were like an uncle to them. That part stung, I won't lie. I loved his kids. But I wasn't about to let Ryan weaponize them to reopen a door I'd already locked. I'll always care about them. But I won't sacrifice my dignity to keep enabling their parents' bad choices. His face hardened. The desperation shifted to bitterness, the mask he wore so well returning. Fine. We'll figure it out without you. I nodded. You should have been doing that all along. And I closed the door. I stood there for a moment, listening as his footsteps retreated. No part of me wanted to run after him. Because once you recognize that someone only values you when you're useful, you stop craving their approval. The next week, Susan called again. This time, she sounded truly worried. Ryan said you refused to help? They might get evicted. I stayed calm. Then maybe he'll finally learn how to stand on his own. She tried the classic line. But family. I interrupted. Family doesn't insult you behind your back. Expect a paycheck afterward. She didn't have much to say after that. I focused on my own life. Picked up a hobby I'd long put off, photography. Spent weekends exploring, taking photos, and rediscovering what it felt like to live without being tethered to someone else's crisis. Every time my phone buzzed, I didn't flinch, wondering if it were another emergency I'd be expected to fix. Because I wasn't that guy anymore. It's strange how quiet life becomes when you finally stop being someone's safety net. For years, I was so used to Ryan's chaos bleeding into my world that silence felt unnatural. But after I cut him off, that silence became something else. It became peaceful. A month after Ryan showed up at my door, Susan's calls became less frequent. At first, she tried to guilt me into being the bigger person. You know Ryan's struggling. He's your brother. But eventually, even she realized I wasn't budging. The tone shifted from guilt to resignation. And then, nothing. That's when I heard it, through distant family chatter, mutual friends, whispers at gatherings I no longer attended. Ryan and Emma had been evicted. Emma had packed up the kids and moved into her parents' house, an arrangement I knew wouldn't last long. Emma's parents weren't as forgiving as I had been. Ryan? He was couch surfing, burning through friendships the same way he burned through my patience and bank account. People expected me to feel something. Pity. Regret. Even a sense of responsibility. But all I felt was clarity. Because watching someone deal with the consequences of their own choices isn't cruelty. It's called letting adults be adults. I bumped into an old neighbor one day, someone who used to see me dropping off groceries at Ryan's place or helping with the kids. She asked casually, "How's your brother holding up?" I shrugged. "Don't know. Not my business anymore." She gave me that look, half surprised, half approving. Because people notice when you stop being the fixer. They just don't always understand how heavy that role was until you put it down. Susan tried once more, her final attempt at reeling me back in. She called late one evening, her voice softer than usual. "Daniel, I know things have been tense, but Ryan's hit a low point." I let her talk. Listened as she described how he couldn't find stable work, how Emma was threatening to stay at her parents' permanently, how the kids deserve better. When she finished, I asked, "And what exactly do you expect me to do?" There was a pause. Then the truth. "Just help him get back on his feet. Like you used to?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. I kept my voice calm. "I didn't cut him off because I couldn't help. I cut him off because I finally realized I shouldn't." Before she could respond, I ended the call. Because there was nothing left to say. I spent that weekend doing something I never could before, planning my future without factoring in someone else's emergencies. I reviewed my finances, for once, proud of what I saw. Savings growing. No random withdrawals to cover someone else's rent. No stress about whether I could afford my own life after bailing Ryan out. It felt light. Like I'd been carrying a weight for so long, I forgot what standing tall felt like. I took up photography seriously. Started booking trips, not just to escape, but to explore. Hiking trails. Cityscapes. moments that belonged entirely to me, captured through a lens I controlled. No interruptions. No buzzing phone demanding I solve problems that weren't mine. Just silence, the kind that fills you up instead of draining you. At one point, I ran into Emma's sister at a market. She recognized me, hesitated, then said, "Heard about everything. Can't say I blame you." That simple sentence meant more than any forced apology from Ryan ever could. Because it reminded me, people do notice when you're being used. They just assume you'll tolerate it forever. Until you don't. By the time spring rolled around, I barely thought about Ryan anymore. Not because I was bitter. Because I was free. And once you taste that kind of freedom, you wonder why you ever settled for less. It's been over a year now. A year since I stopped being the person everyone called when things went wrong. A year since I realized that helping family and being exploited by family are two very different things. And honestly, it's been the best year of my life. People assume walking away from family comes with regret. That I lie awake at night wondering if I was too harsh. If I had given Ryan one more chance. If maybe, just maybe, things would have been different had I held on a little longer. But here's what they don't understand. I didn't walk away after one mistake. I walked away after years of being treated like an insurance policy they never paid into. Years of being laughed at behind my back while they cashed my checks. Years of thinking love meant giving until I had nothing left. Now I know better. These days, my life feels like it actually belongs to me. I wake up without anxiety over who's going to need me next. My phone doesn't light up with urgent messages that somehow always translate to "Daniel, can you cover this?" I spend my money on things that bring me joy, not on patching the holes in someone else's sinking ship. I've traveled more in the past year than I did in the previous 5 combined. Not to run away, but to experience the world I'd been too weighed down to explore. I stood on mountain peaks, wandered foreign streets, sat in cafes where no one knew my name, and realized this is what life is supposed to feel like. Unburdened. Unsacrificed. Mine. I reconnected with passions I'd shelved for. When things settled down, not realizing they never would as long as I kept absorbing Ryan's chaos. Photography turned into more than a hobby. I even hosted a small gallery showing. Friends showed up. Strangers complimented my work. And for once, I was recognized for something I created, not for how well I cleaned up someone else's mess. Susan still sends the occasional holiday text. Polite. Surface level. We both know it's more about keeping up appearances than rebuilding any real connection. And that's fine. Because I'm no longer interested in relationships that only function when I'm giving more than I get. I heard through distant relatives that Ryan finally picked up steady work. Good for him. I genuinely hope he's learning how to stand without leaning on everyone around him. But whether he thrives or fails, it's no longer tied to me. And that detachment? It's not coldness. It's freedom. Sometimes, friends ask if I'd ever let Ryan back into my life. I tell them the truth. I wish him well. But I build peace that doesn't require his presence. Because forgiveness doesn't mean reopening doors. It means wishing someone the best from a distance, and knowing you're better off for it. I mentor younger colleagues now. Not just about work, but about boundaries. About recognizing when help turns into habitual sacrifice. One of them said, "It's hard to say no to family." I nodded. It's harder to live a life where you never do. Because that's the lesson no one teaches you. You don't owe lifelong loyalty to people who confuse love with what you can provide. I still keep a folder on my computer, filled with old bank statements, transfers, and receipts. Not as a reminder of loss. As a reminder of what I survived. Every number on those pages represents a version of me that didn't know how to say enough. And every day I don't add to that folder is proof that I have finally learned. So no, I didn't cut off my brother to punish him. I cut him off because I realized saving him was costing me everything else. And I refused to apologize for choosing myself. Not now. Not ever. If anyone asks how I'd sum up this journey, I'd tell them this. Sometimes, the greatest act of love isn't holding on, it's letting go before you lose yourself completely. And that's exactly what I did.